and you're putting yourself at risk out there playing football or playing basketball for college, which is helping generate money, you absolutely should. I think that their voices, should and will be heard on the social justice front as well. I think what they're learning is these student athletes, I think, a fair percentage of them knew that they had some power. I think what they've seen over the last year, and especially now over the last 4 months, that they hold a lot more power in this game than even they realize. Because at the end of the day, they're the product. I mean, without the student athlete stepping onto the field or stepping onto the court, there is no game. And yes, they're, scholarshiped in most situations. But the revenue that a university is generating, the scholarship pales in comparison to the potential revenue, especially with the Power 5 schools. So it'll be something really interesting to keep an eye on here over the next 2 weeks to 2 months as the most difficult challenge in front of them. Because you have this governing body in the NCAA, but each conference, each institution is its own governing body. So you've got all these different conferences, all these different coaches who have their own beliefs and theories about how things should be, run. Yeah, we've seen the 11-game schedule, the 10-game schedule. Look, it's great to throw those schedules out there, but we might be in a completely different situation in a month. And these student athletes may be saying, until these demands are met, you can put all the schedules out you want, but we're not stepping on the field to play. So that is going to be the one I think that sports fans really need to keep a close eye on.
Hey, Ray, taking it a step lower, beyond lower than college football, down to the high school level. I know you're a big lover of high school sports and JV sports. With all this virtual schooling now, and students not being able to come on campus and not being able to convene, do you see these sports like football and basketball and baseball? Do you see these high schools across the country actually being able to have a full season, or will it be an abbreviated season? What do you see happening?
Yeah, and as I say, college sports has a challenge. High school sports, to me, has an even greater challenge, just because it really is the land of the haves and the have-nots. And we know the programs here in Arizona who are the haves. We know those who are the have-nots. Those big power programs, my guess is there would be enough money generated through private donations and sponsors that they could figure out a way to get kids tested and try and put a season together. But I don't know how high school sports will be able to move forward with full participation. I think in some ways what you're seeing is similar to like college sports, where you've got the Power 5 conferences and they're going to do their thing, be damned. And I think that you will see that situation play itself out here in Arizona and other states, where I do think that there is a degree of truth to you gotta somehow figure out a way to bring some normalcy to these kids. Because of what they experience in their homes, kids have missed. But you've also got to be smart about it, health-wise, scientifically, and say, how do we balance the importance of getting those kids back into a level of normalcy versus what are we actually prepared to do from safety protocols and procedures to keep them safe? Because God forbid, you get a high school team that all of a sudden has a flare-up with 10 or 15 student athletes who come down with the virus, and what that could mean to a high school. And it's it's something that I'm sure weighing heavily on coaches and athletic directors, principals, and district superintendents for sure.
And one last question before we wrap up, Kevin. So we have teams and the leagues who've gone out and they've spoken out, and a lot of them have taken very personally the social justice movement. We have NBA especially and WNBA who've been the most expressive, not only this season but through just past years. We have NBA players. They have the jersey messages that they have. They range from Black Lives Matter, say their names, enough power, the list goes on. And one of the things that LeBron James has expressed too is, it's not only a movement, but it's also a lifestyle for many of these. And it hits hard, it hits home. So, and we've seen in the past also, like Muhammad Ali, he was, a major advocate, not only boxing, but he stood up for this and so much that he did. He's not the only one, but right now we're in a time where we're, having a pandemic. We're having this social justice movement happen, and the players, the athletes are utilizing their sport and as a platform to speak out, speak up, and make a difference. And a lot of these athletes also have their own way of which they're doing something themselves personally. How is this different from, you've covered sports for a very long time, many years, from any other time we've seen anything like this? And what do you see that stands out, that's different, and something that we see as a change in the future?
Well, I think the difference is, and you touched on it, I mean, we are, at least for our age group, for our current populace, we're living in an unprecedented time. I mean, yes, there have been pandemics in the past, but our current society is experiencing something we've never experienced before. So you have that. And then when you had the incident with George Floyd, where he was essentially murdered before our very eyes, it created the perfect storm, because as we know, these issues have been bubbling below and at the surface, and in some cases above the surface, but in the eyes of a lot of people, it's just been, oh, that's a flare-up over there. Oh, it's an issue over there. And I think between the pandemic, the level of frustration and hurt, both health-wise, certainly economically, physically, that people were feeling, and then you had the social injustice, the racial issues that have been going on for centuries, just came to a head. And you've had these athletes who have, they've had their own message. They've in some ways had their own movement, but they've been quiet, comparatively speaking. Not saying that they haven't been active, but they haven't been drawing headlines. And, as I was saying earlier, what these athletes, the LeBron James, the big names of the sports, they have now really taken, it's the equivalent of Thor's hammer and slammed it down and said, we are done being quiet. We are done taking a back seat. We are done trying to do things quietly. You will sit up and you will listen, because we have a platform to listen, and we are more than an athlete. And I think because of that, and because of the NBA, I think the NBA has for a long time, but especially under Adam Silver, they've always been on the forefront and kind of had their finger on the pulse of their players. And the biggest thing, and I had this conversation the other day, I really feel like the NBA and the players are a true partnership. I'm not sure you can say that as easily or as comfortably about the other professional sports. And because of that, Adam Silver has entrusted the players to say and do the right things. And conversely, the players have entrusted Adam Silver to give them the platform that he said that he would. And, because of that, we are just beginning to see this present movement. But yes, as LeBron James said, the messaging is great. The message, the names on the back of the jerseys is great. But LeBron also, as you know, chose not to put a name or a message on his jersey. And his reason was, I don't need, a message on the back of my jersey for people to know what my motives are, what my goals are, what my intentions are. And there's a lot of truth in that. And no different than if somebody stands during the national anthem, a Myers Leonard, a Greg Popovich, John Isaac, it doesn't mean that they're not supporting their brothers and sisters in this movement. It just means they're going to support it in a different way. And I don't recall who I saw this with yesterday, but the two words, and I retweeted it, but thoughtful conversation. And I think that's what we're seeing, especially with the NBA and some of the NFL players, is having thoughtful conversations. And if we could just see and hear more of that in general society, how much further ahead we would be. But this really is just, just on the surface stuff. For LeBron and really for all of us, it's what are we going to be doing and saying and trying to achieve next month, in 2 months, in 2 years, where are we going to be? Because it can't just stop, once the cameras stop rolling. And that is where it's critical. And I know for them and a lot of people, a lot of it will start with the vote in November, people feeling and being empowered to truly go out and vote and voice their purpose and their mission. And I think that's where the NBA, specifically with their players, I think you'll continue to see this messaging moving forward the rest of this season, certainly, and I think moving on into next season as well.
Kevin, it was a retweet from Paula Bove, and you retweeted her on August 1st about what the Spurs players they supported Coach Popovich and Becky Harmon because because they had the thoughtful conversations about it. So they supported Coach on doing that.
Right, and the thing that you love about it is that and anybody who's followed or knows Greg Popovich, he's not a guy that's going to share a lot of his the things that his reasoning, if you will. But he's an incredibly intelligent man. And, as he said, the reason he stood is for reasons for him to know and for his team to know. The rest of the world didn't need to know, but he communicated that to his team, so they were completely comfortable with it, But they also know that Greg Popovich fully supports them. I mean, anybody who has followed Greg Popovich throughout this, over the last 4 months knows that he's been as outspoken as anyone about the social injustice and the things that are, going on in our society. And so for that reason, because they had that thoughtful conversation, there was no issue at all. And I think that's what the LeBron James and, the other players are trying to get more people to do is you may not agree with me, but have a thoughtful conversation with me, and unfortunately those things are becoming, few and far between.
Yes, they are, certainly. Well, I want to say thank you, Kevin, for joining us and being a part of our show tonight. I do appreciate it.
My pleasure. I appreciate the invite, and anything for my guy Ed Cole. He's my guy going back a day or two, as I said. So
yeah, buddy.
You guys have a great platform, and I wish you well in your future endeavors. And if I can do anything to help, and Cole's got the bat signal for him.